past week has been loud, heat and fire in Europe, monsoon chaos in South and Southeast Asia, quiet skies in the Atlantic, quiet in a way that makes people watch the horizon. Signals in space, signals in markets, and signals on the ground from Ukraine to Gaza to the Taiwan Strait. Let's connect what happened and ask what it might mean. Spain, France, and Italy are still absorbing the cost of another brutal heat episode and a wildfire season that's rewriting expectations. Spain's government moved to a new, year-round climate readiness posture. Civil protection, climate refuges, water resilience, and a buildup of firefighting capacity, framed bluntly as a response to years of deadly extremes and spiraling losses. That's the policy story. The street-level story is smoke, evacuations, and a public that's wondering why summer strategy isn't enough anymore. People also noticed how wildfire misinformation spreads with the flames. Claims about lasers or hidden weapons tend to surge in lockstep with temperature spikes. The reality is complicated. Drought, wind, fuel load, and heat do most of the damage. The rest is rumor riding the algorithm. Spain's move tells you where officials think the trend line is headed, year-round, not seasonal. Across the map, another contrast, the Atlantic tropics have been quiet. Peak season, barely a ripple. Forecast desks say quiet weeks do happen, even this time of year, and a lull isn't the end of the season. The historical pattern is that silence can flip to noise fast. If you watch the watchers, you can feel the tension build when satellites show a blank basin in late August. Is it a pause before the switch flips, or just a statistical breather? We'll know soon enough, but the message from forecasters is simple. Don't mistake a quiet week for a safe season. Typhoon Kajiki came ashore near Vinh, Vietnam after roaring across the South China Sea. Even with some weakening, it brought lethal flooding, landslides, power cuts, and damage to rice. Northern Thailand saw deadly slides too, with rescue teams working through mud and blocked roads. At the same time, South Asia's monsoon stayed aggressive. India's meteorological service signaled another month of above-average September rain on top of an already wet August. Pakistan and India traded formal flood warnings across the border as swollen rivers threatened to spill yet again. On the ground, Assam saw deadly urban flooding, and Jammu and Kashmir reported dozens of lives lost to landslides after record rain. The pattern here is whiplash. Extremes stacked on extremes. Flood, slide, repeat. If you're mapping signals, this week carved a sharp line between a quiet Atlantic and a restless Indo-Pacific. And that line matters for supply chains, food prices, and the politics that move when infrastructure breaks. In Ukraine, the last 7 days told a hard truth. The war is grinding forward and getting harsher. Russian strikes intensified again, including big barrages aimed to shock. Reports out of Kyiv spoke of mass casualty missile and drone attacks on civilian areas and offices tied to Western institutions. Meanwhile, even pro-Russian military bloggers spent the week scolding their own defense ministry for exaggerating battlefield gains. That dissonance is a signal in itself. The propaganda drum is beating loudly while frontline reality looks incremental and costly. After the Alaska summit in mid-August, some expected a cooling off. What followed looks more like a strategic pause followed by a punch. Hybrid pressure added another layer. The plane carrying the head of the European Commission lost GPS navigation over Bulgaria and landed the old-fashioned way, with paper charts. European officials suspect Russian jamming. Aviation folks have warned for years that GPS interference would migrate from border zones to busy skies. This week, it brushed a VIP flight. It's not just radar screens and missiles. Hybrid pressure lives in the invisible. When navigation fails, the panic spreads faster than the fix. Across the Taiwan Strait, the week's data points were about money and momentum. Taiwan's government estimated that China boosted the cost of its Pacific and Strait drills by roughly 40% year over year, crossing the $20 billion mark. That's not just saber-rattling. It's sustained investment in the ability to choreograph air, sea, and rocket forces repeatedly and at scale. Think of it as training, signaling, and economic pressure all at once, burning fuel and cash to keep pressure constant. Meanwhile, independent analysts tracked political cross-currents in Taipei following recall efforts, but the military tempo is the louder story. Drills don't have to end in war to move markets, alter shipping routes, and redirect defense budgets. The pattern is constancy. In the Middle East, Gaza climbed back to the top of the docket. European ministers blasted Israel's plan for Gaza City as unacceptable, and the UK government publicly pushed to evacuate critically ill children for treatment, while venting anger at the trickle of aid allowed in. It's rare to see language that stark from allies in public, and it landed in the same week Israeli politics argued in real time over how far to push in Gaza City and what to do about hostages. The humanitarian strain is the headline. The subheadline is how openly allied governments are diverging on tactics while insisting they agree on goals. Let's talk markets and money, because they're the shadow thread running through many of these stories. US stocks snapped back after hints from the Fed that cuts could be back on the table in September. That's the front page number. But look at the subsectors that moved on headlines. Defense names often catch a bid when Taiwan heat rises, energy when Red Sea and Gulf signals twitch, insurers when wildfire maps glow. If you want to see where risk managers think the world is going, follow the baskets that move before the public statements do. That's the quiet language of money. Star-conscious watchers spent the week trading notes about outages and interference. We've already seen a rare global Starlink failure earlier in the summer. Millions felt it, and militaries took notice. This week's headline wasn't Starlink going dark, it was the opposite. GPS interference flickering at the edges of Europe's skies, and officials naming Russia as the likely source. Aviation operators have trained for this, but training colliding with VIP traffic in real time is a milestone. It turns what if into what now. The bigger picture, the more we lean on space-based timing and navigation, the cheaper it becomes to cause trouble without firing a shot. In Europe's south, politics and climate fused into a single narrative arc. A government saying out loud that 3 to 5 months of fire weather is now a 12-month civil protection job. In Asia's east, storms and drills created a different kind of fusion, floods that show you what infrastructure can't handle, and exercises that show you what militaries want to handle next. In Eastern Europe, missiles, drones, and online information pushes told a third story. You don't need to win the ground to win the timeline, if you can force the other side to spend, to scatter, and to explain. Let's pause on information itself. Weeks like this are oxygen for rumor. You will see posts claiming satellites are moved to steer storms. You will see threads claiming lasers caused fires. You will see dramatic videos purporting to show secret tech at work. The simplest rule is still the best. If the claim rests on a single frame, a single account, or a single anonymous leak, it's a story looking for oxygen. The hard part is that some real signals, the GPS jamming, the hybrid cases, live in the invisible too. That's where discernment becomes a discipline, not just a slogan. 2 more signals before we tie this up. Vietnam's rice took a hit from Kajiki's floods. India's forecast for a wetter than usual September is good for aquifers, but rough on harvest timing for rice, cotton, and soy. Pakistan's river systems are primed for spillover if those Indian rains dump hard. Food prices don't react overnight, but they do react. And Southeast Asia's rice export policy shifts when storms chew up fields. Watch the next 3 weeks, not just this one. The Alaska summit sits in the rearview mirror, but it still shapes the week. You don't stage a meeting at Elmendorf-Richardson and then ignore the follow-through. Putin hinted again in China that security options for Ukraine exist, phrased to sound flexible, framed to push Kyiv toward concessions it doesn't accept. Meanwhile, the Kremlin's strikes got bigger, not smaller. That tells you which lever they're pulling. Demonstrate pain, float options, and hope the battlefield and the back channel blur together in the public mind. If you study signals, you've seen this playbook before. So what does this week say? It says Europe's summer is now annualized. It says Asia's water is running hot and fast, and will for weeks. It says the line between peace pressure and war pressure is getting thinner in the Taiwan Strait. It says hybrid tactics, jamming, spoofing, sabotage, are sliding from the margins to the center. It says the Ukraine war is not cooling. It is recalibrating around bigger barrages and louder propaganda. It says allies are arguing in public about Gaza in a way that used to happen quietly. It says money is moving in ways that hint at tomorrow's headlines, not just today's. If you're looking for a single hidden hand, you'll be disappointed. If you're looking for patterns, how weather strains systems, how systems strain politics, how politics strain markets, and how all of it pushes information into the gray, then this week draws you a clear map. Stay alert. Watch for repetition. Quiet Atlantic, noisy Indo-Pacific, drills that happen again and again, warnings that become policy, interference that moves from borderlands to busy air lanes. When signals repeat, they stop being noise. That's your zero signal situation report. Keep asking the hard questions, keep your eyes on the patterns, and don't mistake silence for safety or noise for proof. We'll be back with the next map.